Lord Tremendous here. Got another book review here for you. This one is a horror book called The Anthology Vault by R.C. Landsman. Mr. Landsman is, per his about the author at the end of his book, was born and raised in the Dominican Republic, and he learned to speak English through Hollywood films and perfected his writing by self-learning, participating in online forums, and writing short stories. He has also written several unproduced screenplays for short films and a TV pilot. So the individual has written a lot. It is currently, I think, slotted on Amazon under occult horror, and it is available on Kindle Unlimited for obviously free, and I believe you can get it on paperback for $8.99. I got it through Kindle Unlimited because, well, I have a subscription, and if you've watched any of these yet, you know that. I believe this is the only book that he has published. It's the only one that I've been able to find, and from what I understand, this is a series of short stories, horror stories that he wrote over the years and published because somebody online challenged him to do so, which is awesome. He knocked it out and he got it done and he published it, and then he reached out on Reddit and asked me to check it out, which I was happy to do. That all being said, number one thing that I took away from this book was this author has a huge amount of passion for the horror genre, a ton of it. You can see it and read it and feel it in every single one of his stories. Unfortunately, one of the biggest problems with this book, in my opinion, is since Mr. Landsman, English is not his first language, per his about the author, he needed to hire an editor and a proofreader in order to make it read smoother. Unfortunately, there was a lot of wrong word usage, a lot of misunderstandings about the English language, a lot of punctuation, run-on sentences, improper word usage, on instead of in, it'll instead of it would, will instead of would instead of will. It was all over the place. There was also just completely wrong. Instead of mating, it was bedding, it was matting, it was a lot of stuff like that. And self-published books, any book that's first edition, yes, I can totally understand, respect, and even expect spelling and grammatical errors peppered through the book. But when it becomes the rule, it hurts the story badly. Another problem is, unfortunately, since these were all short stories, while imaginative, the author focused too much on developing the main character as opposed to building suspense, building a plot, driving a plot, having a plot in some cases, and then the endings were always just kind of thrown together like he didn't know what to do with everything. However, they are imaginative. Every single one of them is imaginative, and the end part, he calls it the survival guide, the horror survival guide, and it's like 20 pages of single paragraph anecdotes about stuff in horror movies. For example, I really enjoyed that part. I really did. Every single one of those little paragraphs that I read. One of my favorites, and this is a light spoiler, so I apologize in advance, was in order to find out if your pet is possessed by an otherworldly entity, hold them up in front of a mirror. If the image in the mirror has a different reaction than the pet in your hand, it is most likely possessed by an otherworldly spirit. Do not let on that you know this, because if the otherworldly spirit realizes it, you'll be in danger. A lot of stuff like that. I don't know if he meant it to be tongue-in-cheek, if this whole thing was supposed to be funny, and I just missed that, but the horror isn't there. The suspense isn't there. The dread isn't there. There's some colorful images and I'll get into all this in the spoiler section, but there's some colorful imagery. There's some gory bits. There's some horror, scary monster type stuff, but it's just, there's no buildup. There's no suspense. There's no dread. There's nothing. There's an interesting story in the beginning as you're learning about the main character, and then it just kind of peters out into a bland early 80s, late 70s horror B film. I would equate it to the old like Twilight Zone shows or whatever. And that's what it felt like. It felt like Mr. Landsman was watching like a lot of Twilight Zone, old black and white Twilight Zone movies, and was trying to duplicate the scarier ones. A few of them I felt like I'd read the story before. So unfortunately, I didn't hate this book. I didn't hate this book at all. I just the potential is there. The author just hasn't found their horror writing voice yet. Uh, According to these about the author, he is writing another book. Mr. Landsman, please, 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 I'm not trying to be insulting. I'm not trying to be condescending. Hire an editor. Fiverr.com. I put an ad on every third video about Fiverr. If you don't use the editor that I put on there, that's totally understandable. But get an editor, my friend. Your creativity and your passion is there. Unfortunately, everybody needs an editor, but your book needs it I'm sorry, man. I'm not trying to be a jerk. It's just the truth. And a proofreader just to help you smooth out those rough edges. And I think that it would really take your book miles ahead of where it's at right now. So all in all, unfortunately, I have to give this book 2 stars out of 5. I just didn't enjoy it. There were parts that I did. I can respect the imagination this man has. I can respect the passion because you can feel it. You can sense it in every story. And the survival guide, while it's not really a survival guide, the anecdotes, they were clever. They made me laugh. So 2 out of 5 stars. I'm going to get into it even more in the spoiler section, but right now I'm going to play an ad, give you a spoiler warning, and then we're going to get right into it. So buckle up. All right, in case you guys didn't already know, I am a self-published author, which is why I'm so passionate about self-published books. It's available on Amazon.com and paperback, Kindle, and Kindle Unlimited. If you're interested, the link's in the description. I'd really appreciate it checked out, left a review. So get ready, spoilers are coming up next, so if you're still here and the music stops, it's your fault. All right, you're here for the spoilers, so let's get to it. So, like I said, this is like a collection of short horror stories that he wrote over the years that he put together and published, and that's what you've got here. So this isn't like a big novel or anything like that full of one single story. It's a whole bunch. And that, I think, is part of the issue. It can be done. It can be done. I'm a huge fan of Stephen King novels, and that man, he does short stories. He does. That's how he started, and he's actually in the past 4 or 5 years he put out one called like the Sunset Stories or something like that, where he did a bunch of short stories, and it can be done. You can get a horror suspense book. A short story done that is phenomenal. That literally makes it so that you're like, you know what? I might not sleep tonight. These short stories weren't that. By early 80s, late 70s standards, these would be B-rated stories. This would be something that you would watch on PBS at like 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock at night when your parents weren't paying attention. It's just, they're not scary. The author spends a lot of time developing the character and not everything else that he should be focusing on. And like I said, the passion is there. This man has a heart that's 3 sizes too big. It's just he needs to find his voice. He needs to focus his writing a little bit and definitely get an editor because it is a difficult read. One of the first stories is about an individual named Jared Samantha Wirt. And Jared, that's the problem. He develops this character. He's a sheriff, and he had this partner, and while he was teaching this new guy the ropes of being a sheriff, they run into this kid whose face has been removed, and they try to get him to the hospital in time, but they can't get him to the hospital in time, and he dies. But before he dies, he tells him the name of this town called Daywood, and the kid literally tells him, don't go to Daywood for any reason. So for like 2 years, they're trying to figure out this murder and everything like that, and like organs were removed and all this other crazy supernatural stuff, and they can't ever get a lead. They can't find any town named Daywood. Blah blah blah, and the cop, he's a lieutenant, and you learn everything about this lieutenant. He's telling you this story after he comes to Daywood. He's like narrating it after he got to Daywood, so you get that Twilight Zone vibe. But it doesn't mesh well in the book, in the written format. So, because the guy's like dead by the end of the story. So it's like, when did he ever have time to narrate this? Why is this Oh, I see. This is Twilight Zone format in the written medium. It doesn't work. But you learn way too much about this sheriff. He's a lieutenant that doesn't want captain because he likes being down with the men, but it's just enough authority that he doesn't have to do any of the garbage work. He likes being able to train people. He's a good person. He's got no wife or anything like that. His parents are dead. You see what I'm saying? You learn a ton about him when he should be building suspense. He should be building up the drama. He should be building up the plot and then working on the end. So what ends up happening is after 2 years of trying to figure this out, he retires, and 6 months into his retirement, his aunt wants to move out of this house that's he's in Texas, in the house that he's got to go up to. For some reason, he can't do it on the phone or online. He's got to go up and help his aunt sign paperwork so that they can sell the house that his dead parents left for him. You see? And so he's driving from Texas to Maine 6 months after his retirement, and as he gets into Maine, of course, he didn't drive. He flew from Texas to Maine, but then he had to drive like whatever it was from the airport to this place in Maine in order to sign paperwork or whatever it is he had to do. It's current time, right? So as he's driving there, what does he find? He finds an off-ramp with a sign that says, "Welcome to Daywood." He can't ignore it. He's not a sheriff anymore. The author even makes that statement. He's not a sheriff anymore. He's retired. He has no authority anymore. But he can't ignore the "Welcome to Daywood" sign. So without any authority, he decides he's going to take it upon himself to get answers for the guy who's lost his face and go into this town. He's got his gun on him, which, yay him, but that's it. And so he goes through this town, or he goes down this ramp, and he gets to the town, and of course, there's a roadblock. He has to abandon his car, and he meets the people. Everyone's super nice. Of course they are. They give him all the information that he wants, even though he's got no business investigating anything. He's got no authority to do anything like that. Everybody would know that, but it's a nice enough little town. He meets everyone he needs to. He gets all the information that he needs without any resistance. He finds this lady, and then the lady is super nice, kind of crazy, gives off a creepy vibe. And in order to get her to talk, he says some incredibly inappropriate things to her, which of course makes her try to kill him. He shoots her in the arm because, hey, he's a hero. And she goes down. He arrests her. Everybody's like, literally everybody comes out cheering him. And then all of a sudden the sun goes away and everybody turns into a weird blobby monster with teeth and claws that don't make any sense, no rhyme or reason, and then it's an immediate shift in perspective. You go from knowing Jared Samantha Wirt to the monster. Like, it literally, one sentence is you're Jared, the next sentence you're the monster, and it's so jarring. It's literally like getting punched in the face. You're like, whoa, what just happened? Why did that happen? And it took me a minute to actually shift gears in my head. Now it's the monster, and that's it. That's the last time you get Jared's perspective. He's running away from the monster, screaming. He gets caught, and then the monster tortures him forever and ever until he releases him back into to our realm, so he can be the bait for the next person that they're going to torture. The end. It's just it's abrupt. There's no suspense. There's no build up, and then you get this half-assed ending that's just kind of like whimper, and it's just and they're all like that. There's one of the better ones. I shouldn't say better ones. One of the more interesting ones was, it starts off. It's called "The King is Dead," and it starts off, and you're getting the perspective of the main character, and it turns out, you figure out pretty quick that it's you think it's a human, and then you realize no, it's not a human at all. You're getting the perspective of a rat. And that was pretty cool. And that's where it goes off the rails. So the rats get attacked by these giants, which are humans, and they're living in this abandoned castle. Of course, the exterminators, the giant, slayer humans, come in and kill, start gassing and killing all the rats because they're exterminators, kind of what they do. And it's interesting to get everything from the perspective of the rat. It really is, but this is a horror book, okay? This is a horror story. This isn't supposed to be a fantasy adventure type of thing from the perspective of a mouse or a rat or whatever. And that's what you get in that story. And the only thing that makes it interesting is the perspective. It's not scary. It's not horror. It's not even dreadful. so the rats all get killed. Some of them survive. The main character survives. They meet some other rats after they escape to the city. And eventually they go into the sewers, and there's a big fat Gestapo rat down there. And the main character knows what he has to do in order to figure out what to do. Like, the Gestapo rat sends his thug rats to get tribute from the main character's rat clan that's left. And they try to fight these thug rats, and they fail miserably. And a couple of them die. They take some of their women. They take all their food. And they're like, oh, morale is so low. But now the main character rat suddenly knows what to do. He goes and he gets this really great piece of tribute. And he goes to the gangster rat, the Gestapo guy. And he's like, here's the tribute, but I want to give it to him myself. Of course, he agrees to it because the plot needs him to. And then he goes, the Gestapo rat's like, I'm so happy that you gave me this wonderful tribute. And then the main character, who has shown no courage or really any, chops whatsoever, is like, I'm here to kill you. Lightning flashes, I'm sure, and stuff. And then they fight, right? Well, this Gestapo rat is a big, huge rat, right? So what does the main character do? He runs in circles until the big rat gets dizzy and exhausted from watching him. And then he falls over, and then he runs up and he bites the Gestapo rat's neck out, and he dies. Like that. It's that easy. It is that easy. And then all the other rats follow him because he killed the Gestapo rat. They go after the human exterminator guy that killed his dad, their old king. They get to his house. They find his house after just plot convenience. I can't really describe it any better than that. And when they get there, they start attacking him. And, of course, the guy's got, like, a broom that they consider a sword. Again, clever. I thought that was interesting. But they attack this guy. They're able to drop a toolbox on his head in some sort of Warner Brothers Wile E. Coyote skit. He falls over after killing two of the rats that mean nothing to anybody. And then when he's on the ground dazed, they bite his neck until he dies. And then there's a little blurb like in a newspaper magazine, and I'm sure the rats live happily ever after. Are you seeing the Twilight Zone vibe that I'm talking about? It's the old black and white Twilight Zone films. And it's just, they're all like that. They're all very boring. I don't know how else to put it. It's just, they're boring. I found myself drifting a lot. There was nothing to hold on to. There was nothing to grip you. There was no horror. There was no suspense. There was no dread. There was no scariness. There's one where this guy is a bad guy. He's lived for over 200 years, and he's got all the wisdom of a 4-year-old child. He was able to live for 200 plus years because he made a deal when he was 33 years old with a dark entity that as long as he horribly tortures a handful of people every couple of decades, he gets their souls, which allows him to not age and live for a little bit longer. And he's done it for over 200 years, and he's still an amateur at it. I mean, he's got no skills, no abilities. He gets, he leaves a trail for the police to find every single time, and that's his story. He's running from one place to another over the decades because every time he decides to kill people, he leaves an orgy of evidence everywhere he goes. And at first, I'm like, okay, I get that. I could totally get that. But after 200 years of torturing and murdering people, you start to kind of figure stuff out, right? I mean, for crying out loud, Dexter was better at it. And he was just a mortician. So anyway, the guy, in some weird, convenient thing, another worldly entity sends this watcher to watch this guy do this and decides enough is enough. This guy tortures and kills people horribly for absolutely no reason at all. I'm going to send my assassin after him, called the Shade. I know, lightning, thunder. And he attacks this guy in the most ridiculous ways. The guy's driving and he shuts his radio off, and then he makes so the car doesn't work, and then his gun is outside of the car, and then his windshield gets hit by a hammer, and it's just ridiculous. Like, this guy's this Shade thing is supposed to be this supernatural assassin, but apparently he's got a real kink fetish when it comes to cheesy practical jokes. Eventually, after toying with the guy for entirely too long, he's able to knock him unconscious, tie him up, and then he's going to bury him alive, right? And it's like, okay, I could get there. But the guy comes to. He has a Swiss Army knife that he stole from his most recent victims because apparently he read this story and knew he was going to need it. Even though he's bound and gagged, he's able to reach into his coat pocket and get the Swiss Army knife and cut himself free. And then he stabs this supernatural shade in the leg, which causes the shade pain. And then he's able to escape. He's able to get away. He shoots the shade a few times. It falls down. He gets back up, he shoots it again, sets it on fire with a lantern because convenience is convenient, and then he thinks it's dead. He goes back to his home, which is in some apartment somewhere, sits down on the bed, goes, woo, what a day, and is so proud of himself for doing it. And then his TV turns on. It does the snow static thing, and it's a POV of somebody's eyes, basically, and he's watching somebody in their home, they're in his home, and they're walking through his living room, and they're walking into his bedroom hall, or to the hallway that leads to his bedroom, and he's watching this all on TV, and this 200-year-old guy who has made a deal with a dark entity and has been murdering people for generations freezes in terror and fear at the sight of what he's seeing on his TV. So the bedroom door shows up on the TV, the door opens, and there's no one there. Where is he? The TV shows his feet at an odd angle from below the bed. He looks down and the bad guy's under the bed! He grabs his feet as the guy jumps off the bed, grabs his ankles, crushes his ankles with his strength alone. The guy screams in pain, the shade grabs him, and when the cops show up, there's blood everywhere, his head's in the fridge, and there's body parts everywhere. The end. I mean, it's boring. It's early 80s, late 70s B-rated film stuff, and it's not good. It's boring. It's not a horror story. I think this guy would have a really good thriller career. I think you could do maybe thriller, but maybe mystery or something like that. I don't know. Just maybe even like a darker fantasy type of thing. It's just none of it's inspired. None of it's scary. None of it's suspenseful. It's cheesy. It's really cheesy, and it's frustrating. So, yeah, the best part of this book, for me anyway, was, like I said, in the non-spoiler part, the end, where, it's towards the end. It's the horror survival section. And I really enjoyed that. Because, like I said, it's not exactly a horror survival guide like he labels it. It's just an anecdote thing. For example, it's possible for ghosts to go insane too. Any unusual erratic behavior by an apparition, poltergeist, or spirit can be explained by this. It's just, that's it. Jobs and sewer inspection should be avoided if possible. It's not only a dirty job, a job with high percentage of unexplained disappearances. And I read that as it was written to show you that there are plenty of grammatical errors and stuff like that. Like I said, the book needs an editor really bad, as all books do. If you're writing your own book, or if you're writing your own book, what a stupid thing to say. If you're writing a book and you don't get an editor, you're cheapening your work. Do your story the justice it deserves. Get an editor, a good editor, not just some buddy of yours. Get a good editor, get an experienced editor, because otherwise you run into jerks like me that can't let it go. But anyway, to get back to my point, the last part here of the book, I just love these little anecdotes. Snakes, frogs, rats, and other rodents can all swim up through your toilet. Another being capable of this is the one called the invader. Unlike other creatures, the invader always waits for the moment when you are going to sit on the toilet before coming out. Its goal is not to get inside your home, but to get inside of you. This is gold. I'm sorry. I was cracking up. Again, not exactly the horror trope that I think this author was going for, but that is gold. Maybe like a scary movie, like the comedy, the spoof on scary movies, that movie that came out. Maybe he could write a really good like calm horror type thing, because this whole it's like 20 pages of these one paragraph things that are just gold. If you find that certain things in your house are being inexplicably moved when you're not around, there's no reason to panic. You can even put them back where they were, but never try to catch the one responsible. It doesn't like to be seen. Just wonderful. Those 20 pages were terrific. I loved that. But the stories themselves, like I said, just, they did not have that. They didn't have that stuff at all. Maybe like a Doctor Who-esque character that does horror instead of sci-fi. That would be wonderful. You know, it's just like, yep, that's a corpse. It's just... I don't do horror. I don't. I write military sci-fi. I can't do horror, but I do read. I just devour anything Stephen King. I am a Stephen King fanboy. I do. I love his work. I don't know the guy or anything like that, but I love Stephen King's work, and so I love good horror stories. And the Mr. Landsman's passion for this genre is so evident. He just needs to find his voice. I think once he finds his voice, especially if he keeps doing like with those little anecdotes right there, man, I could read those for a while. So like I said in the non-spoiler review, 2 stars out of 5, just simply not only because of the slew of grammatical and English errors. Granted, English is not this man's first language, and I give a lot of leeway for that, but I can't forgive it. It hurts the book badly, and honestly, they're just not scary. They're not. They're trying to be. I get that. I can see that, but they're not. There's no suspense. There's no fear. There's no dread. There's no horror. And if you don't have horror in your horror stories, you don't have a horror story. So, but I didn't hate this book, so I won't give it a 1 star. It's 2 stars out of 5, and I am going to pay attention to this author. I am following him on Amazon because I'm curious to see how his writing evolves if he keeps going, and I hope he does. But that's it. That's going to do it for this review. Please feel free to check it out. Check this book out. It's not expensive at all. You can get it for great prices on Amazon. The description, or the link, will be in the description below. Check it out. Read it. And let me know if you agree. Let me know if you disagree. Tell me why. We can have a debate. We can have a discussion. We can have an argument. I don't care. I love talking about books. So, with that, as always, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, or complaints, feel free to put them in the comment section below, and I will get back to you as quick as I can. And as always, thanks.